Here we are then, the hot topic in the gaming industry at this moment, recording on Tuesday, October the 17th, 2017. You got myself apps here. I think this is just about to start simmering down. There was a lot of fuss made last week, but it is loot boxes in video games. And not just loot boxes, I think you can bundle in microtransactions with them. Unless you want to talk about the gambling front, which I don't really want to get into on this particular editorial. It's more around my opinion on when or if loot boxes or microtransactions should be present in video games. The entire subject is pretty grey. There isn't much black and white, so if I start rambling and going off on one and not making much sense, I'll apologise in advance. But let's have a look at it. Loot boxes and microtransaction in video games have been present for years now, but the last week or so it's really kind of got to a boiling point with the Star Wars Battlefront 2 beta having them in it, Shadow of War having them in the single player game, Forza 7 being criticised for it as well. There's other examples obviously that have come up, but for years these have been present and we've kind of made a bit of a fuss over it and not much has changed, but for some reason the perfect storm seems to have formed, and now people are questioning the particularly loot boxes. They are questioning, is this some form of gambling that's not being regulated? And say we're not getting into that, but for whatever reason we're in this situation now where everyone is talking about loot boxes, and I wanted to speak about them alongside the microtransaction piece. So let's get the easy bit out of the way with first. If you are developing or publishing a free-to-play game, then you can do whatever you fucking like. As far as I'm concerned, they have to make money somehow in a free-to-play game, whether that's through microtransactions, loot boxes, ads, or a combination of all three. It doesn't really bother me. And to me, it's quite simple. If you make a free-to-play game with a shitty economy and one that isn't fair to your players, the game will fail. People will figure that shit out, they'll figure it's a bit of a swindle, and it'll be gone. So to that extent, they have to make the way you transact with the game fair, and if they do that, then it'll end up doing very well, as long as you've also got a good game under the hood also. So that's free to play. It's kind of like on its own island. But where it gets a little bit murky is when we get to the so-called AAA 40 to 50 UK panned full price jobby games. In an ideal world, we don't live in that. I don't want them unless there's no real world spin. But even that, I don't like the idea of having any loot boxes or microtransactions in at all. That's not likely to happen, and this would be a very short video or broadcast if I just stopped it there. So I have to kind of think about where I could draw a realistic and fair line, and it's pretty simple to me. If it's a single player game primarily, and I can ignore them without the need to grind, which is a very subjective term or line, that is. My version of needing to grind might be different to someone else's. But if I can do that personally, then okay. I can accept that they are there and they are present in the game. I still really hate the fact that they spoil the context of the game and the immersion. So if you look at something like Shadow of War, you can purchase a loot box in that game, open it up, and out pops an orc to place in your army. And I just can't think how that fits into the lore or any way in the Lord of the Rings. Do you know what I mean? It gets a little bit under my skin, that part where I think about, there's orcs popping out of boxes, these magic boxes that you can buy, and that rubs me the wrong way a little bit. But as long as you can ignore them, I kind of go, okay, fine. Not fine, but they're there. You can get away with it, basically. Multiplayer games, it's cosmetics or get the fuck out, essentially. The second that you start potentially giving players with deep pockets an advantage to buff their characters and to be stronger than other players via buying their way there, that's when I have a problem with it, to be honest. You're making it close to pay to win at that point, and when you've already shelled out 45 UK pounds already, it's like being slapped in the face with a cock. No one wants it. Well, some people might, but in general you don't want that. And I think that's what frightened me, and frightened's a bit of an over the top term, but you know what I mean, kind of scared me about Battlefront 2, is that I saw the way the loot boxes gave players buffs and increased their strength, increased their effectiveness, and I thought, oh my god, this could fuck this whole game up. DICE have come out and said, look, it won't be pay to win, you can't get the most powerful buffs through buyable crates. But this sort of communication should have been made crystal clear before the beta went live. As it is, they've kind of fucked themselves in the arse a little bit by letting players find it and then make their assumptions on how it's going to be implemented. If they'd just been clear up front, then this would have just gone under the radar a little bit of Battlefront. It would have been brought up, but not to the extent that it has. And that's generally where my head is when it comes to loot boxes or even microtransactions in games. Overwatch, great example. Cosmetics only, fine. If you want to pay more, a chance to get your skin that you want, you can do, but you haven't got to do it. It doesn't make any gameplay or mechanical difference. Shadow of War, single player, annoys me with its lore-breaking inclusion, but can be ignored to a certain extent. But the ones like Battlefront 2 scare me slightly. The annoying thing is with Battlefront 2, and I'm picking on it, which is unfair, but this is just how I kind of got into this fault space, is this was on course to be the game that I wanted from DICE's first effort 2 years ago. The inclusion of a single player story, thank you. Heroes and characters from all of the Star Wars eras, no season passes, free content updates. But it may have come at a cost. Asking for, particularly those last two bits, no season pass and free content, it appears as though their way of making up the difference is going to be in the form of payable loot boxes and microtransactions. Something like FIFA, where in Ultimate Team, that mode is pretty much pay to win, but I'm actually okay with it. And you might think, well, hang on a minute, you just said you don't like pay to win. And no, I don't. Not in a full price game, not in any game you've got to pay for. I don't believe in that being the case. I wouldn't want to take part in that. But with FIFA, there are so many other modes to dive into. You've got online seasons, you've got cooperative seasons, pro clubs, the journey, which is story mode, offline career, be a pro. There's probably even more. I've not played the game for a couple of years in depth, so I don't really know what's going on. But the game is much deeper, and Ultimate Team, for all intents and purposes, is segregated. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe the real world money loot box driven progression has its own complete separate mode, progression and playlist. So say, for example, you fire up Battlefront 2 and you're presented with two online modes. One where your progression, buffs and unlockables is tied to your performance and perhaps your time spent in the game. And the other one is the Rich Bastard Whale playlist, where anything goes. You can buy progression through loot boxes, they can drop buffs and weapons and unlockables, and it's essentially pay to win. That then gives you, as a player, a very clear choice when you boot that game up, and an opportunity to not be impacted by the potential pay to win model that could be there. And if you decide to go into the Rich Bastard Whale playlist, then you do so on the understanding that you could be fucked up the arse by someone who spent a shitload of extra on the game. Now I know that's probably not going to happen for Battlefront 2, because there's a fear from the publisher side that they would make less money doing that way. But I do think that's one sensible way to try and accommodate the loot boxes with performance enhancing drops, without it, completely poisoning the well for those that can't afford to or simply don't want to buy into this anymore. And It's going to be interesting to see how this develops. I see that the UK Parliament, one of the MPs in I think Cambridgeshire has presented the question, and it's going to, something that's going to be discussed. Typically, the answers don't come back for a month or so. We've seen the ESRB and Peggy kind of wash their hands of it, which is fine. They're not there to dictate what is and isn't gambling. But, the fact that there's been so many high-profile games that have come up, particularly in this last sort of 3 months or so, appears to have caused a perfect storm where people who aren't necessarily that involved with the industry are now taking a look at this and saying, okay, what's going on here? And it's going to be interesting to watch. And I think I'll speak for many people who are probably listening or watching this. We don't really want microtransaction or loot boxes in the game. It's something that we've had to tolerate over the last few years. The age-old argument is that games cost more to develop now, but the game prices have not increased. In fact, they have gone down, and that's true. If you were to buy an N64 cartridge back in the day, it's well in excess of what you pay today. It's not completely black and white though. Nearly every game that comes out now has perhaps a gold version of the game, which includes DLC and one-time use things, which is more expensive. So instead of paying £45, you pay £60. Then there's a platinum edition, which is £80. I think there's even ultimate editions that span for like nearly £100. So there's opportunities for people to invest more into a game than they need to. But this in particular is a slightly worrying trend, and I think do your best to keep it away from the gameplay and watch this space, because I don't think this is something that will completely subside. Maybe the UK kind of government looking at it, maybe nothing will happen with it, and then that'll be it for a while. But people are slowly but surely getting fed up with this. It's interesting how it's suddenly become come to the front, all at once in the last kind of 2 weeks or so. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Definitely something that will probably develop later on this year that we can perhaps check in back. But nothing more for me to say apart from thanks for your time and ta-da.